With that said, welcome in for a quick tutorial of the Fallout 4 creation kit. I'm just WANYA, I'm a former game dev and current modder, predominantly doing level, environment, light, effects, design, and also items like consumable and armor clothing, but you're not here from pity old me, you are here for the creation kit. First thing that you're gonna need, of course, is the creation kit itself. You can find that over on Steam for absolutely free. It's in the game development / Fallout franchise categories. It is free, absolutely free, and if you own Fallout 4 as well, you can also use all the Fallout 4 assets. If you don't have Fallout 4, you cannot use the assets for the Fallout 4 creation kit. Speaking of assets, once your engine has started, which may take a little while at the start, nothing much will happen inside here. What you need to do first is to open actually a file so that you have assets to work with, which in this case is the Fallout 4 ESM. That is of course the basic requirement, and you can double click it and then
X marks the spot.
Depending on whatever other plugins you want to be a requirement for your mod. So for example, if you require something from Far Harbor, you also want to make the DLC Coast ESM one of your requirements, or if you need something from Nuka World, you also want to click that one so that this one also is needed for your mod. For now, however, I will just go for the fallout4.esm file and just show you around how the creation kit works, what all these different things are, so that you can get a little bit of an insight to it. Also, if you want to pick up on a project you have done before, you also want to make sure that it's an active file. You do that with just clicking on this button that says status active file. That way you will see that the status will change from plugin file over to active file, and therefore whenever you save, it will save on this specific file. Whenever you have this warning window being up, don't worry about that. That is always there, even when there's nothing loaded. For example, right now I have no project loaded. It will be there. There's just nothing you can do about that, really. If there is an important warning like broken precombines, it will tell you upon loading your own project in an extra window that pops up extra besides the warnings window. So you don't have to worry about that too much. You can just completely disregard it at the start. On the left here, we have the object window. This is basically your main toolkit where all the assets are in there. But let's go through all the categories. In actors, we have everything regarding NPCs, the player characters, companions, loudspeakers, everything that's basically interactable. You also see that the perks are, for example, listed here. And when you click on that, you, for example, can see all the different perks listed right in here. Then the next one is audio. Here we have everything regarding audio. So music tracks, music types, we have the sound markers and whatnot, everything regarding that. In character, we have things like the factions, the relationships, the AI packages and whatnot, equipment slots. All these kind of things are also here listed in character. Then we have items. Items are basically, well, all the items that you can imagine. Ammo, armor add-on, books, all these kind of things. Armor add-on is something required for armor. That will be something for another episode that would go too deep right now. Crafting recipes, holotypes, keys, whatnot. All these kind of things are listed right here in items. Then we have magic, which is a legacy of Skyrim in that regard. This one includes all the consumables, so food and drinks and, like, you know, the stim packs and stuff like that are listed here, as well as their effects themselves. So effects on the player, for example, fortify charisma, you see it right here, so something that gives you charisma. All these things are listed in magic. Miscellaneous is quite a big one. There's a lot of stuff that even I don't know, to be honest with you. If you feel free to let me know what you've found out over the time here. But there's a bunch of very important things, like for example material swaps. If you want to make a texture very simply replaced with a material swap. Messages, like trigger messages, for example, when you interact with a plaque, things like these. When you pick up something like the medicine bubble hat, things like these are listed right here. Special effect has something like the camera angles, the camera shots, the camera movement in dialogues with other people. You also have the hazards here, so all the radiation markers, the fire markers, all these things. World data includes all the stuff that is regarding the data of the worlds, which is why it's called like that. Duh! Having weather types, the water types, you know, locations, encounter zones, and climates. Whatnot. And world object is the stuff that you usually place into your world, so activators, containers that are lootable, doors, benches, beds, chairs that you can sit on, lights, movable statics, so things that you can push around, statics that you cannot push around. All these kind of things are listed in world objects. Whenever you're looking for something and you don't know where to look for, you can also just use the filter. For example, let's say I want to get a chair where somebody can sit on. So I just type in chair into the filter, and now it will filter everything that has chair in it. You also can go more specific because we see there's a bunch of different items. Let's just say I want to go for a furniture, so something that NPCs can use. Then of course I navigate to world objects and furniture, and then you have everything that is listed as a chair. Let's just say you know an item and you don't know the full name yet. Let's for example say something chair and something red. You know, you want a red chair, you can just put in a star and then type red, and then it will scan every single item that has both these words in that order in them. You can also utilize the object window if you want to edit items in the game. Let's just say for example you want to edit a yardstick. You don't know where to look at, so you just type into filter yardstick and see if you find one, and there indeed it is. There we see a yardstick, which is a miscellaneous item. That's exactly what the junk items are. And there, when we double click it, we for example can say, okay, I don't want to call it yardstick, I want to call it Coca-Cola can pair square shotgun stick, for example. And then you just could say okay, and then it will be renamed like that. However, if you want this item to be standalone, so a new item that doesn't override the old item, what you want to do instead, of course, is that you duplicate the yardstick with right click and duplicate, and then you have a copy of that. When you now double click that copy, you can now simply edit this one and say Coca-Cola can per square shotgun stick. And also in ID, you can now type in your own editor ID. What I tend to do for my mods is that I give it my own prefix of WANYA, everything capitalized, because we're not communists, which is also why the Soviet Union got abolished, and since they realized that USSR is capitalized. And then underscore, and then the item name itself, for example, new yardstick. You know, something like this, and say okay. And then it will ask you, of course, because you just overrode a previous object, if you want to create a new object. Now, if you want to be very, very thoughtful, you can say, of course, yes, but then you still have to delete what you have made extra. So in my case, I will say 99999, because that's just how they say it in Germany. And it will also ask you again if you're sure to overwrite this object, and also list how often it has been used or referenced and such. And there we go. There we have now our own miscellaneous item, which is the WANYA new yardstick, which is the Coca-Cola can per square shotgun stick. Now, of course, you can edit basically any item that you find in the object window. This is, of course, not limited to just the miscellaneous items, but this would go a bit too deep. You now know what the object window does, which was the purpose of why showing you the object window in the first place. Next thing I will show you is the cell view. In the cell view, we see every single cell/level that the game has to offer. You may have encountered this before, where you go up to a building and the interior is part of the structure, but other times you interact with a door and you have a loading screen. In case you weren't able to figure it out already by yourself, you will be loaded into an own new level aside from the open world level. This serves the purpose to save resources from the engine and your PC, making the game way more stable. Therefore, it should not be a surprise that all the interior levels are listed in their own category of interior in the cell view. Then we also have recent cells. These are cells that you recently have visited in the creation kit. So for example, if you're somebody who used a level just recently, it will be in that list. Then we have the Commonwealth, which is all the extra locations of the open world. So this acts a bit different, that it basically loads all the locations that exist rather than levels, because all these different, you can say, chunks of the open world will be loaded separately. If my engine will not crash right now because my motherboard has a lot of issues lately, you can see, for example, there we go, Abernathy Farm EXT Abernathy Farm EXT02. So Abernathy Farm apparently has 2 separate chunks that have to be loaded in the world. A good game to see how chunk loading works is something like Minecraft, because it's very square. You can also see in the distance how it renders those chunks. So if you don't know what chunks are, that's exactly what it is. I also should mention that loading these exterior cells will take a long time, because it basically has to load the entire open world, so to speak. It of course doesn't load every single object of the entire exterior world, but I think you get the reason why it will take a bit longer. It's just way more objects there than in interiors. Then we also have the world spaces of Diamond City and Diamond City FX. Those do not include the interior. So if you want to visit, for example, the Medical Mega Surgery Center, whatever it is called, I always forget the damn name, that will not be listed here. You only will have basically the exterior marketplace, the walls of Diamond City and so on. That's basically what you will see in those 2. Similar with Good Neighbor, also there you don't have the third rail interior listed here. It's an interior, therefore it categorizes an interior. In Good Neighbor, in the real world space, you only have all the exterior. So basically the like the market stands, you know, the little road where the triggermen are walking around, that stuff. Then we also have Sanctuary Hills World. This is basically Sanctuary Hills pre-war, before the bombs drop, where everything is clean and pristine. That's precisely what that one is. Whenever you single click on a cell, doesn't matter if it's interior cell or exterior, you will see on the right side, in the right list, you will see everything that's in there. You see they have an Abraxa cleaner here, they have an adverts poster, an alarm clock and whatnot. You can scroll through. You can also filter after things. So let's just say you, for example, want to look for a yardstick in Andrews Station 01. And you just type in yard. You can see there's no yardstick in Andrews Station. When we go over to Arched Systems, we see no yardstick. We can click through now a while until we see Automatoys Corporate HQ01 has 3 yardsticks in them. So when you double click Automatoys Corporate HQ1, it will basically load the interior in the render window. Right now I have ArcJet Systems loaded because I accidentally double clicked on that one earlier. This will take a little while, and here we are right now. And we are now loaded in Automatoys Corporate HQ01. Now this is now also where the render window comes in. You can see we see a little bit of the interior right now. It's very hard to see though. When you press M on the keyboard, it will enable/disable the markers in the render window. When you press A on your keyboard, it will disable and enable the lighting of the cell, so giving you a little bit of a preview. If you want to move around in there, however, you will need Shift and the spacebar and your mouse. Those are the 3 main components for it. So if you want to, for example, now move the camera up a little bit, because we now, you know, have a very bird's kind of view. We kind of want to tilt the camera in a 360-degree angle. You hold Shift and then you move your mouse. This is where you have a 360-degree view around of the level that you are in. With spacebar, so I will just release Shift right now. When I hold spacebar, I can navigate around in a horizontal and vertical way, but not in a 360-degree angle. You can also do similar when you just press your mouse wheel. That's basically the same movement I can do here. So I will move basically in just a plane, basically, smoothly the way I want. While with Shift, you can rotate 360 degrees. And this is basically how you navigate through the level. So let's just say I want to get to the end of the hallway. So I, once again, go down here with the spacebar. Now I use Shift to turn around. Now I use the spacebar again to move all the way over to this door. There you go. And then I can use 360 degrees with Shift again, and find it just like that. With the mouse wheel, you can also just zoom out and zoom in when you scroll it. That's how it works. And you can also just click an item. For example, let's try to click the door here. And then the camera, the 360-degree cam with Shift, will be oriented to that door. Now you see that I move in a way different circle, so to say, or globe rather, around this specific object. That's how that works. So now I'm focused on this specific one. Now, the door example was actually a good one. We just tried to select the door and we couldn't. We seem to have not selected the door. When you have that happen, it usually means you selected an FX item, an effect item. For example, when we go back into the cell view and remove all the filters, we can see I selected Mist, Large, Round, Dusty, Dimmer. If you don't see it at all, you can also just go by Selected Only and make a tick here, and then you see, oh, that's what I selected here. Yes, it's indeed a item that is more for effects, which is the mist. Now, the way you can try to get rid of it is with layers. This is where the layers come in. So when I open this one, you can see that we have different layers for the level. And we can then also make these invisible with this little eye icon. So for example, if I remove Back Bay, we can see everything disappears and we no longer will accidentally select it. That's how this operates. The only unfortunate thing now is, of course, that apparently they haven't put the mist into an own layer. That's, however, something that you will see quite often Bethesda doing, that they put things like these into their own level, because otherwise it will be hard for you to navigate through, of course. You will have to zoom in very, very far into the objects to be able to select them. And yeah, when you want to make new layers, of course, you can make a new layer just like that. You can also select numerous items and select them then to a layer with add selection to layer. If you want to just build one specific layer, you can just put the A on it, which means that this will be your active layer on which you will be building. So every item that you put into the world will be placed in there. But how do we place items into the world, you may ask? Well, we have the yardstick now in the object window. We have a level. The way it works is that you just go wherever you want to go, and you just drag and drop the item of the yardstick right into here, and there we see the yardstick in the render window. Now, of course, it's not properly placed yet, is it? Well, when we hit E on the keyboard, we can now see we have this little gimbal here. This is to move items around, just like this, into these 3 coordinates. With W, you get this 360-degree rotation axis. Now, another thing I want to show is for me on 2, which is the scale of the object. I can scale it up, I can scale it down, however I want. You can also double-click the item if you want to, if I also will be able to properly select it, because apparently there's some mist in the way right now. It's very hard to get that one. Well, what we can do instead is just we go to Selected Only, and we double-click the yardstick. That way, the camera will be oriented to this specific object, and you will be able to usually double-click it as well. And there we have it, yardstick. And when we go to 3D data, you can put the position in by simple coordinates. You can also scale the object if you wanted to, and rotate it if you want, and also reset the rotation in case it completely falls off and you want to reset it. Things like these you can do right here. Now, when you move your object and it kinda seems to like stick, well, I mean, it's a yardstick, haha. No, if it seems to like stick to like certain coordinates and it moves in those little steps, the reason why is because you have enabled the snap to grid at the very top left. You can enable and disable that. It is very helpful when you place, for example, floors. If you have, for example, these floors, let me just show you that one, and you just want to make more of them, it's very helpful to have the grid enabled, because that way they will snap together. Well, not technically snapping them together, but you know, they're like sorted in a grid. So that way they stick to the grid and they have a very nice and flawless transition. But there is something which is snapping together, which is the third option, snap to connect points. I should warn you that not every object in the engine has that. So these parts, for example, here don't have that. So those don't automatically connect to each other, but there are a few objects that have snapping points that you can enable and therefore just very fastly attach to each other. Same also goes with the rotation axis. So as you can see, it now is in like 45-degree steps. What you can do at the very top left is you just disable that, and that way it is very smooth. You can now twist and turn it the way you want. You can enable and disable the first I just mentioned, also with key combinations like Control Q for the snap to angle and just Q for the snap to grid. When you put down objects that have a collision / a gravity, which is the biggest bitch of them all because it continuously tries to pull down your pants, there is another way how you can place them into the world if you want it to be a bit more natural, let's say. So not only can you place them down manually the way you want to make it nice and decorative, but you also can just enable the Havok system. That, when you click that, boom, this item falls down onto the ground. And there it is. It's very helpful when you have a very cluttered space and you want it to fall down there in a natural way. That's also how you can, for example, put skeletons very effectively into the level. Now, I guess another important thing I should maybe show you is how to save your project as well. Be sure to make regular saves of your mod and also have backups because you just never know. The way you do it, simply put, is with this disk icon at the top left. It will then demand you to input your file name, so you just put in your file name and you say save. Another thing I want to show you when you open your file again. So let's just say we want to open something at the top left again, and we want to select, let's go for example for the Commonwealth Castle right now. So you want to load this one. What you want to do is you double click it. That way you load the file. If you just say OK right now, it will give you a little heads up that there's no active file set. What it means is that when you press save again, it will demand from you to set a new file name again. And that you basically create a new version of what you have. This is very useful if you work on somebody else's mod to make, for example, a patch. Or if you, for example, just make your first mod, you know, or the first start of a new mod, and you don't want to override what already exists with the DLCs and the base game. If you want to load your project and directly save over it again, you just have to click set as active file, and that way you can load it up again. And it will automatically save on this one whenever you save. What I will do further right now is explaining a little bit the top bar, and then I think we are basically covered on all the basics. I could explain every single of these more in detail for different videos. So let's actually go through it. So now you know how to open a file, how to save a file. I don't know what go to selection on PC means, to be honest. I have no idea what this button does. I pressed it a bunch of times on accident and nothing happened. So if you happen to know what it does, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Then we have preferences, which is the settings for your creation kit. You can adapt a lot of things. For example, how many steps for the snap to grid, the movement speed, all these kind of things. Everything regarding the render window. You can do a lot of stuff like that in the preferences if you want to. You know, just fine adjust a few things. I don't have much change, to be honest. The next things are undo and redo. I think I don't have to explain those. Then we have the snap to grid and the snap to angle and the snap to connect points, which we covered earlier. Then we have toggle local global translation on also the key G. What this one does is when I press it is that it adapts the gimbal. Let me just briefly switch that. There we go. Either to the object or to the world. So right now it's oriented to the world, and now it's oriented to the object itself. So it adapts the gimbal to the object. Then we have the world height map editing. This is for landscaping purposes. Also the same with landscape editing. So if you're somebody who creates a new, like an entirely new world, these two things will be vital to you. Other than that, you will not likely gonna touch those. The Havok sim, which we briefly covered earlier, animate lights and effects. So if you have lights like oil lamps, for example, or running water, this is where you can animate it in the render window for yourself. Toggle lights on A, which, toggles the lights, basically. So you can see what the level looks like once you are in game. I have a little bit of a wannabe preview and also one without it if you need more lights for yourself to see what you're actually doing. Useful for the exteriors now are toggle sky and toggle grass, so it enables the sky and it enables the grass and disables it however you click it. The same with force render window weather. What it does is that it, shows you how the weather would look like if you have weather scenarios. And then we also have open filter dialog window. This is useful if you are somebody who needs dialogues for like NPCs, wants to overhaul them, etc. It's a very large topic, all of these, that I could make own videos about. The next thing here in the list is the nav mesh mode. You can also enable that with Control E. This is to place down navigation meshes, so planes on the ground for the NPCs to navigate. The way they've done it in Fallout 4, I can briefly show that, is they have all these little triangular things that the NPCs can navigate on. It's like an object that you place into the world that they know that they can navigate on. Worth for its own episode, because there's a lot of things to know about that one. Now, if you are lazy with lighting and you don't want to do your own lighting in your level, you can just use Setup Default Lights, which is the next icon here on this list. What it does is automatically places lights into your level. Now, the next thing in the list is bad news, because if you don't subscribe to my channel, you are an absolute doofus. Welcome to Create a Trigger. Triggers are used in your levels, for example, having automatic doors that open when the player walks into that trigger cube that you have created. It also can be used for quest starts, or for example, NPCs approaching the player out of the blue, like somebody claiming to be a Nigerian prince and needing some money, that kind of stuff. Then we have a multi-bound cube and a multi-bound sphere. Maybe I have to briefly explain. A multi-bound basically is like a marker. It acts like a marker on several objects so that they load as a group in exteriors. Like they render as a group and not separately. So for example, if I look at these 4 floors, those are 4 separate floors. I want them to remain separate, but I want them to load in one thing. On the exterior, that's the way I use a multi-bound cube. I never used a multi-bound cube in the interiors. That's usually more like an exterior thing. Since we are on the topic of rendering, we now have occlusion planes and occlusion cubes. What an occlusion plane does is you can use it to make objects that lie behind it to not render for the player. This is very, very performance enhancing in big interiors, the same as that with the cube. You can also join or merge them together, and you can also break them apart again if you decide that, okay, it's not really working the way I want to. That's where you do that on the 3rd one. More performance stuff are the room bounds. With a room bound, you create a square that is not visible to the player, and basically what this marker does is that everything that is within this marker, within this square, is loaded at 1 when the player enters it through a portal, which you can then create with the enter portal mode and creating the portal. So for example, in the Youngster Submarine of Fallout 4, they've done that, where you have a door, you open that door, and that door acts as a portal to the next room that you can then see everything within. That is very, very helpful for performance when you have large interiors. You can also, or you should also, link the portal to the designated room so that the engine knows which room is to be loaded. You can also then undo that with the attach portal from room. And also when you, for example, end up in the design that, okay, we have 2 rooms, they are now kind of one, you can also join them together into one new room bound. Then we have a sound emitter that you can create. So for example, something like a new sound marker if you want to create a new one from a very specific point or place. You also can create an acoustic space, so like an isolated room where only certain acoustics are audible within that room. And then you also have the box light, which is used for having lights only in a designated box, essentially, so that they don't shine outside of that box. Very useful in interiors, once again, if you have a light that shines through the wall because it didn't detect the wall properly. This is where then those box lights are very, very helpful. Then we come to C3. With that said, kind greetings to the organizers of C3. You can create a collision plane, a collision cube, or a collision sphere. So if you want to, for example, close off your level, or you have a glitch somewhere, like there's a hole in the ground or something you want to close off because the player easily gets glitched, that's where you can use a collision plane, a collision box, or a collision sphere, however you want, so that the player no longer can go through. It's like an invisible wall, essentially. The Force may be with you with the current plane, the current cube, and the current sphere. What these do is that they create invisible forces that can move the player around. I hereupon haven't used them at all, so that's something for me to discover in the future, but that's apparently what they do. As I said, I never used them myself. I would have to try. Finally, we have the LOD clip volume. LODs are, well, level of detail. Those are basically the render cubes, so to say, for objects, so for lower resolution. A good example for that are the houses in Sanctuary Hills. Those, for example, have their own LODs, so when you're further away, they have a very low resolution, but as you approach, the resolution improves stepwise. That's what LODs are. Yeah, and that kind of rounds up all the basics about the creation kit of Fallout 4. Feel free to let me know what kind of modding aspect you're interested into, what kind of thing you would like to learn more about, because then I have an idea what to make more videos about in the future. Thank you so much for watching that video hereupon. If you have any questions, feel free to post them into the comments if anything was unclear due to my accent or whatever, you know, just too fastly explained. Don't you worry, you don't have to feel bad about asking twice. You can also ask me in my Discord or in my Twitch live streams when I mod and game live. And with that said, thank you so much for watching. Special thanks to all the Ko-fi supporters, and I'll catch you another time, another day.